All right. Well, it looks like we are live. Thank you for joining us if you're here live with us. Otherwise, we will get a recording up on YouTube and then a podcast. Or if you're joining us later, welcome. This is Homeschool Conversations, and I'm going to introduce our guests and myself in just a moment. We're here to offer information for families who are currently homeschooling in a crisis situation because of COVID-19, and for families who might be considering homeschool to keep this as something that they want for their families. So we're going to talk about some different aspects of homeschool, how we started homeschooling, and then what are some different resources out there for homeschool. So I'm going to start off with Angela Humphries. If you will introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, thanks for having me, Rebecca. This is
Okay.
exciting, and I always appreciate the opportunity to highlight homeschooling and other school options across the U.S. So we're in 3 different states. North Carolina is going to look different from Virginia, possibly, than Nebraska. And I guess I just got involved because, in homeschooling, because I kind of rejected the options that we had around us. So I had that liberty to say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I'm going to try to homeschool on my own. And so 3 years later, 4 years later, you lose track of time, which I should joke about more frequently, right? And so moved into that position of directing my child's education instead of taking that backseat position. So and then that's led to other advocacy. So I also wanted to push school choice and kind of shine a light more on that in our state. So you could consider me a founder of North Carolina School Choice. And I'm always asking people to come along with me and just raise their voices. And so that's kind of where I am in life, homeschool mom, and having a role in advocacy for parents and students. So,
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Angela.
mhm.
Okay, and Rachel Terry, if you'll introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, Rachel Terry. And again, thanks, Rebecca, for putting this together. This is really great. And I know with parents who are dealing with trying to figure out how to educate their kids, all the information you can get, that's always been something I've looked for with my kids. I've got 3 kids, and 2 are in college now, and 1 is in high school. And so we're almost at the end of this K-12 journey. And we've done all kinds of different things. Before we moved to Nebraska 8 years ago, they had attended a brick and mortar charter school and an online charter school and traditional public schools. And we've also done homeschool since coming to Nebraska. But they have almost always done some part-time schooling in the public schools here too. So we have always just kind of had to put things together, kind of like puzzle piece and education together for our kids. And especially in Nebraska, we have very limited options. We don't have any charter schools. There are no tax credit scholarships or vouchers or education savings accounts or anything. And so a lot of parents here have to get very innovative when trying to get their kids what they need. So like Angela, this kind of led to some advocacy. And so I founded a group called School Choice Nebraska. And we try to advocate for all options because kids are all different, and you're going to be able to find something that works well if you have lots of different options. So we're not for any certain kind, we're not just pro homeschool or pro charter school or anything. It's as many things as we can get. That's what we're after.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. All right. And I am Rebekah Goode, and I have worked in public education for about 15 years. I taught Spanish and English as a second language in different public schools within North Carolina. And then I also founded a 21st Century After School program for immigrant and refugee students, and also a tutoring program specifically for English as a second language learners. And then I became a mom and really started thinking about education for my own kids. And that was what led me to homeschool. So now I am a homeschool mom. I'm pursuing a PhD in Instructional Design and Technology, and I see so many places where we need to be more learner-centered. Rachel, I think that's kind of what you were saying, that's why we need so many different options, because each learner is so different. And so I have just found that homeschool, a lot of the things that I'm studying in instructional design, that homeschool just really opens up all of those options. A lot of those things that when I was working in K-12 in a public school environment, a lot of things that we wanted to do, but we really couldn't because everything was so systemized. Homeschool just really opens up so many options. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm a homeschool mom. I have 2 kids, a third one on the way. So I'm nowhere near like Rachel, what you were saying.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a little boy coming in July. So we'll be starting adding another one to the homeschool mix. So that's kind of, like I said, why I wanted to do this was just to open up the conversation about what homeschool really is. And I had a lot of those myths. And if we have time, we'll talk about some of those. We may do whole episodes about different myths about homeschool. And I really believed some of those things. And now that I'm a homeschool mom, I really want people to really see what a homeschool really is, what the benefits really are. It's really not as difficult as people think. It's just a wonderful way to strengthen your family. But again, just even from the instructional design and education side, there's so much to be offered and discovered in a homeschool environment. So thank you so much for being here and for doing this. I did want, and some of you kind of touched on this a little bit. How did you start homeschool? What was it that, kind of what really made you make that decision? And then how did you start? Because I know that was really confusing for me. I thought, I don't even know how to do this, because you're told, by society that, when a child turns 5, you put them on the school bus and then they're gone. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And I was coming from, a public school background. I had a master's in education, and I felt very intimidated of, can I really do this? So how did you start homeschool? And tell us a little bit about your state. I've homeschooled in North Carolina and now in Virginia. So I can talk about a little bit about both of those states, but how do you apply? What kind of paperwork is involved? And again, so just tell us a little bit about how did you get started with homeschool? So Angela, if you want to take that first.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us have heard about accidental homeschoolers, right? I didn't set out on this path to begin with. When my child was the appropriate age deemed by the government, born on a certain date, after August at some point, then it was appropriate, according to them, for me to enroll my child in kindergarten. So we went down that road to begin with, and she was probably ready to be put in instruction at age 4. But anyway, she was just gobbling up information, learning words, able to, say her phone number, recite her address, spell her name, all this great stuff, right? And then we almost had the same teacher 2 years in a row. She was hit at school. There was just a series of things that made me, I tolerated the things for a number of years. And then eventually I came to a breaking point. And my breaking point was not some big monumental thing. It was just one more straw that broke the camel's back. And I actually picked there was like a Valentine's Day party. And I communicated with my, at the time, 3rd grader, that, hey, this is probably going to be your last day of school. I want you to go out on a fun note and enjoy the day, eat all the candy you want. But after this, I knew we were kind of going to see who our real friends were. We would have to deal with, were these 28 people really your friends, and talk about 28 cupcakes for birthday parties and all that stuff, and what the, best fad toy was. I didn't have to deal with that stuff anymore. It's such a relief. But anyway, so I found that there was resources all around me in my neighborhood. So I tapped into some of my neighbors, and over the years established relationships with them. And we collaborated on field trips, creating opportunities where we didn't have any. So it can be a very structured environment like the public school system, where you're doing work, whatever, 8:30 to 3:30, or it can be, honey, you don't have to ask to go to the bathroom anymore. Yeah, you can have a snack. You don't have to ask permission, or get out of the refrigerator, So dealing with the teen, you're kind of all over the place, but it's not perfect. It's what you direct it, so you create the environment. And while I'm not poetic in saying it, while I think there's value in the government-run school for some folks, there's value in homeschooling for some folks also. And so we're not just going to sit by idly, right, while we're attacked or stereotypes are put out there about us. I mean, it can look like different things. So I don't know if I answered the question very well, but I gave it a shot.
No, and then in North Carolina, you apply through it's for the whole state,
Yeah.
correct? It's through the Department of Non-Public Instruction.
Yeah. So in
Okay.
North Carolina, we don't apply. We file for a notice of intent. So when
Okay.
we have decided that, okay, so you have to qualify. So each state is going to look differently. So you do want to figure out what your state regulations are. And a lot of times having those homeschoolers nearby, they can help you clarify what is needed. And sometimes you have to be discerning yourself, because sometimes people sound like they know, but they are missing a critical piece of information. So, but in North Carolina, I'm required to have a high school diploma to lead homeschool instruction in my home. And I don't remember, because it was 3 or 4 years ago, could have been 10 years ago. I don't know where the time goes. But the same thing. So I wanted my husband to be able to direct instruction in case anything ever happened to me. So we both sent in our high school diplomas to the Department of Non-Public Instruction in North Carolina. And the official form is called a notice of intent. And so you're putting the state on notice that you're proceeding to establish a homeschool, which is a state recognized school in North Carolina. And you can choose whether this is a religious school or a non-religious school. So I think a lot of people think, oh, they're all Christian schools. No, they're not.
Right.
Right. You could be completely omitting of that. You can be a Muslim school. You can be whatever. Right. You have that freedom.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, Rachel, if you'll tell us a little bit about how did you start homeschool, and then how does that work in Nebraska?
Yeah. So I'm going to back way up. When I first really started to look at homeschooling, it was way back in 1998, and I had my first newborn. And so we were living in the on-campus housing at the Colorado School of Mines, where my husband was doing graduate school. And I needed to make some extra money. So I started trying to pick up jobs here and there. I was teaching dance classes, and I had put signs up around campus saying that I could do editing. I had an English degree. And so I started getting work that way. And then I got a call from a professor at the school. She said, I saw your signs about editing, and this is an unusual question, but my husband and I were both professors, and we're homeschooling our son, and we need somebody to teach him English. How would you feel about doing that? And so I met with her and decided to teach this little 12-year-old boy's English to him as part of their homeschool. And so that was when I first came into contact with homeschooling. And it was so interesting because this family story, so the mother had like 11 miscarriages before she finally had this little boy. And, they're both in academics. They by the time this baby was born, they really had firm ideas about what they wanted for their child's education. And she actually was an education professor, and he was in science or something. And so what they were doing was fielding out their child's education to different people. I think at the time that I was teaching him English, there was a graduate student teaching his math, and they would get other people to teach other topics. And this little boy was so well-rounded. He was so free and easy around all kinds of different people. And so here I was, a new mother with a newborn, watching this and thinking, wow, there are so many different ways to do education than I thought there were. And anyway, when my kids were old enough to start going to school, I was just sending them to the neighborhood schools. But at the same time, I was working part-time from home as an acquisitions editor for a publishing company. And our best-selling books were homeschool books. Like, we had various kinds of books that we were publishing, but the ones that were really selling all the time were the homeschool books. And so then I was working with authors who were homeschooling moms and talking to them, and again thinking there is so much out there that most people don't see. And we got to a point, one of my kids was in 3rd grade. We were still in Colorado at this point. And it was a rocky school year. It was a teacher who must just have been having a tough time in life. She was not able to manage her classroom very well. And at Christmas, we pulled our kids out of that school, and our neighbors pulled out their children too. And we registered with an online charter school. And so that's kind of like a tiptoe into homeschool, I think, the online charter schools. It's, you're given all of this instruction. There's a teacher that you can talk to when you need help. The teachers meet with the kids periodically. And so we did that for 3 years. And then when we came to Nebraska, there came a time when the public schools weren't meeting all of our needs. And I kind of, at this point, look at public schools the way I look at like public libraries. Like, we're paying for these institutions. You pay for the public library, whether or not you use it. Or you can use it a ton, or you can use it just a little bit. And so we have used it as needed, as if it were a library. So sometimes we've used it a lot. And sometimes, like this semester, we only used it for choir because that's all we needed it for this semester. So in Nebraska, we have some pretty great homeschool laws. It's pretty easy to get registered as a homeschooler. If anybody's looking for the links, if you go to schoolchoicenebraska.org, we have the links to the paperwork, whether you want to do it full-time or part-time. So if you want to do it full-time, all you have to do is fill out this paperwork, send it in. You have to name your school, and you have to just give some general information. And then if you want to use the public schools part-time, then there's another form, and I have the link for that one too, that you send to the local district, and you can say, I want my child to take choir at this school, or maybe you want them to do 4 classes or 5 classes. So anyway, I was thinking back when I knew we were going to be having the discussion, like, what are the things that led us to this? And we've had all kinds of different experiences, but I really think that first experience with being asked to do part of somebody's homeschool was the beginning of me thinking there is a whole world out there that a lot of people aren't aware of. And actually here in Nebraska, when we moved here, it was also professors that introduced us to this idea of part-time. My husband works at the university, and it's not uncommon for people to use the system in this way.
All right, awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. For me, we started in North Carolina, so kind of like what Angela was saying, we had to get those high school diplomas in, and you get to give your school a name in North Carolina. And in North Carolina, they didn't ask for any test scores or evaluations. I think we were supposed to keep attendance records, and I do still keep attendance records to a degree. Here in Virginia, we go through our local LEA, so whatever school district my kids would be assigned to where we live, we have to file a notice of intent. I don't do religious exemption, so I do that notice of intent every year. We do have to submit some type of evaluation, so I give my kids the CAT, the old school CAT test every year, and I submit those scores. I also keep a portfolio, and like I said, with the attendance records, I do, on their portfolios, I do have them put dates on on what they do. And I just kind of keep that for myself. But that way, if that, was ever come into question, I'd have all of that there. As far as why, my daughter, she did go to kindergarten and first grade in a public school in North Carolina. I loved her kindergarten teacher. When we got to first grade, I missed her. I will say that it felt like 7 and 8 hours a day of her being gone at that young age. And I was also working in the afternoons at that time. So we'd get her off to school, and then I sometimes wouldn't see her until 6 o'clock at night. And it just felt like dinner was rushed, and then she was in bed, and then I wasn't seeing her, and something just didn't feel right about that. And then once we got to first grade, there were just some things being said by the teacher, and I just felt like morally, I thought, this does not jive with me. I feel like I want that time with my daughter to be able to instill that moral framework. And I just felt like her being gone so much, I wasn't having that time to be able to be there to really debrief, some of the, and again, even now, sometimes my kids will hear things or have questions about things, but we have that time that we can talk about it, kind of come back to what is our moral framework, what is our foundation, and why do we believe what we believe? So we can always, kind of come back to that. We always have that place to come back to, and it's not, all this time goes by and, then all these thoughts and these questions. And then, and in some ways, I know for me, I didn't always have adults that I felt comfortable talking to about those at that young age. During a lot of those questions about what is the meaning of life, what are these big, philosophical questions. It was just all kind of, that was not something that we talked about. So I really wanted my kids to be able to have that time and that relationship to be able to, talk about those things. And with my kids, we explore all, worldviews. And I know that's one of the myths about homeschoolers is that they have very low levels of tolerance. I can show you studies that show that homeschoolers actually have higher levels of tolerance because, in my opinion, at least for us, we have a foundation. So I'm not threatened by other worldviews or my kids being exposed to other thought processes. I don't have a problem with that. Again, we still come back to what is our belief, what is our foundation. So I feel like my kids are certainly very open. They know that there's other worldviews or people who do things differently than we do, and it's not threatening for us because it's just part of, just how we, like I said, with our homeschool, we study about different types of people, different worldviews, and it's just, we have that understanding and we have something to always come back to. And that was what I felt like the public school wasn't offering that. They were offering academic, but they weren't offering the moral framework that I really wanted to have. So, and again, I've just discovered so many other educational benefits along the way that it's just made me, such a big fan of homeschool. So I want to get that information out. So
you're beaming.
So that's a little bit about how we got started. So my next question is, what are the benefits of homeschool? And again, this is not to slam, a K-12, a public school environment or private school or charter school or whatever. But as far as homeschool, for you, what are the benefits of homeschool?
Let me yell it in again. You're beaming when you're talking about it. I mean, that's a benefit. You have this, you have control over directing your family's education. Your whole family is on the same page, I would imagine. You're not playing catch up on the weekends, right? Like, what did you learn today, Johnny? And Johnny's like, nothing. But hopefully it's different in your homeschool, or maybe that's just like a teenager encounter where they're just going to say, no, we didn't learn anything. But I think I know a little bit about your homeschool, Rebekah, where you were like, we're a little bit more interest focused. So that is, that's awesome. You're not going to do that in the government run school. I don't think you're even going to do that in the charter school. You're not always going to have that one-on-one interaction. So when I talk about interest focused, like if we like natural sciences, we could keep going back to the Museum of Science over and over and over again. Rachel was talking about services we are paying for. That is a service we are paying for as taxpayers. And you can go it alone. You can go it as a group. You can pay $5 each and have an instructor lead that for you. So there's all kinds of benefits and opportunities. And, you know, going back to the schedule, you can homeschool in the evenings. You don't have to do it at 6 a.m., you know, or you can do it at 6 a.m. if you have an early bird, you know. So having that flexibility, I don't think people really wrap their minds around that. Because I guess we do try to create schedules in our homes, right? We have our work schedules. But so I stopped working so I could go down this road to homeschool. And while I'm, I don't have a degree, you don't necessarily need a degree to direct that education. I feel like I'm still catching up from where my former schools omitted lots of information. You know, I found myself commenting today on somebody else's live stream like this, and I was like, you know, my government-run school said we all came from apes. So going back to worldviews, you know, it's like, what do you really want to be teaching? So, and if you want to teach that sort of thing, whatever, go for it. If you don't, and you have a completely different opinion and something to base that on, then by all means, go for it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I love all of those things that you said. And it made me think, you know, some of the best times of my kids' childhoods that they talk about are the times when we were all learning together. And, you know, you talk about, you know, what did you do at school today? And it's exactly what you said. Oh, nothing. It was fine. But when we were all learning together, we had the best dinner time conversations, you know, about like the Code of Hammurabi and I love learning. And I feel like I learned so much when I was teaching my children that I had never learned before. And it's such a rich experience to be learning with your children. That's one of the shocking things I found was I didn't have to know all the things that they were learning. We could just learn it together. And that's a really fun experience to learn something with your children. And also, I was thinking about the relationships. The relationships in your family are very rich, but also the relationships with other people. I mentioned earlier that some of our neighbors pulled their kids out of school the same time we did. And we had so much fun with that family. You know, we'd say, okay, go up to their house. We're going to do a science experiment up there. And then everybody's coming back down here for history. And, you know, just these kids, this little gang of kids going up and down the street to do their lessons. Or if it's a nice day, let's go do vocabulary at the park today. And the flexibility and the family life. And, you know, homeschoolers get criticized for being unsocial or like unsocialized. But what I have found is the socialization that we have found within homeschooling, you know, with other homeschoolers and with neighbors, adult neighbors, you know, those are things we really would have missed out on if we had not been homeschooling.
All right. Yeah, we could do a whole hour about socialization. I would love, because that was one of the myths that I believed also. And yeah, my kids, they have more friends and they're out, and we're out. And well, I'll talk when we talk about how I walk through a typical homeschool day. But yeah, socialization is, not not a problem. And in that, I want to say thank you to the families who were doing this way back when and kind of paved the way for us, because now there are so many resources. There's, you know, co-ops and, you know, there's advocacy and things like that. And a lot of families who started, you know, way back didn't have that. And I'm so thankful for those trailblazers who've kind of made the way.
Yeah, me too.
For us. As far as
Me
the
too.
Yeah. As far
That's
as
a
the
really good point.
Yeah.
We don't thank our predecessors nearly enough.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I think about, there was a mom I knew back when I was in college, and, you know, and I was kind of coming from that generation of women. We need to be educated. We need to be, you know, out in the workforce and professionals and be taken seriously. And I'm still all for that. But I remember she had a master's in education and she was homeschooling her 5 kids. And I thought, why is she wasting her education?
Yeah.
She needs to be out there, in the workforce. And then when I became a mom and I thought, this is what it's about, this is what life is about. And I've enjoyed, and again, I still need, some of those professional outlets, but being a mom, that's, that really is what it's about. So that totally changed my point of view. But yeah, I was definitely one of those people who thought, oh, she's wasting her time. She's wasting her life.
Well, you hear it so often, you can't help but adopt it a little.
Yeah. So as far as the benefits of homeschool, I could go on and on. But I tell just a little story. Again, I could do a whole episode just about ADHD. But I was having my son. He's 8, almost 9, and last year when I took him for his pediatric checkup, and I told them, I'm having, so again, he had just turned 8, and I said, he's kind of like his energy level is all over the place, and sometimes his attention, his memory. Sometimes, like if I give him a list of 3 things to do, he might remember the first or second, but the third one, forget it because he's so focused on just getting that first thing done. And so I'm telling the pediatrician this, and I said, and by the way, we homeschool, and here's some of the strategies. We're working on self-regulation. We're giving him breaks, letting him, do things, a different way. And I said, what do you think I should do? Should I have him tested? And they said, no, you don't need to have him tested. He's in the perfect environment. I said, really? I said, I never thought about that. And they said, yeah, you're doing everything, that you should be doing. And they said, oh, he'd only need to be tested if he were in a public school. Then he would need to be tested and possibly put on medication. And I said, yes. And it was so,
breaks your heart.
It was so surprising to me because I said, so medically, there's nothing wrong with him. And they said, absolutely not. He's fine. Medically, he's appropriate. He's normal even. And so I said, so really this is an issue with the school. If he were in a public school, then this would be a problem. And they said, yes.
Wow.
And so that was just really, that just really opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of kids, because they don't fit in the system, that they think there's something wrong with them. And that was unequivocally what they told me. They said, there's nothing wrong, quote unquote, with your son. It would be the environment that he would be in. And he's in the perfect environment. And you're doing all of the strategies, you're doing all of the things to help, as he's still learning because you're, making these changes and these adjustments. And I just thought back to when I was an educator, when we had these meetings with parents about ADHD or learning difficulties or any of that, I never remember the school telling them, hey, there's other options. It was just, here, you need to have your kid tested, put them on the medicine, and we're good. And so it was never about that there was anything about the environment. It was just always, it was about the child, and the child thought there was something wrong with them. So that was just, to me, and again, that wasn't why, we had started homeschooling. It was just kind of something that came up that, especially for my son, we need to, make certain adjustments. And Angela, you talked a little bit about unschooling. My son is definitely real big on that. And I talked a little bit about his coin collecting. He's gotten so obsessed with coin collecting, and he's learning so much. He's just becoming a little expert. But if I were, when I sat down and I had his social studies workbook and his curriculum, he didn't want to do that because he was distracted because he wanted to do the coin collecting. And I was frustrated because I thought, he has to finish his curriculum. He'll never amount to anything if he doesn't finish these worksheets. But because he was wanting to do the coin collecting, and he knows about history, he's learned about chemistry, metallurgy, he's learning all these different things. But again, I was obsessed with the fact that he had to do the social studies worksheets when he is doing social studies, and he's motivated to do that. Again, so those are just some of the benefits of homeschooling, is that the kids have time to pursue their curiosities and be creative, and that they're not always, having to say, again, I'm not saying that there aren't times when, yes, we have to do math, and yes, we have to, some of these subjects that you may not like. Yes, we do have to do, I want them to, be well-rounded, but we do have that time to explore their curiosities. And they're getting so much out of that. So I'm just so happy that we have that flexibility for them to be successful, and that we're setting them up to be successful. And I think sometimes the systemization of public school kids are set up to not be successful. And again, that's not the fault of the teachers. I love teachers. I know that they care about kids, but it's just the system itself. It's not set up that way. So, okay. Advice for families new to homeschool. So this could be, and Angela, I know you came up with a list of tips for.
Oh man, I forgot those already.
So if you want to talk about that, so this could be for families who are kind of in this this crisis situation. Again, one of the things I would like to point out to families who are suddenly homeschoolers is that. This is different than homeschool. This is public school at home, and again, trying to suddenly shift to a distance learning, environment. And I understand that's very difficult for the school systems. And I know there's teachers out there who are really working hard to try to make those adjustments. But what are some advice for families new to homeschool? And then how would you, maybe contrast what actual homeschool is versus kind of what's going on now in home?
So I'm trying to think of my tips. If I was like a ninja, like Corey DeAngelis, the school choice expert, I could pull it up and we could put it right on the screen and everything. So I appreciate what he does, but I'm like, man, I wish I had his ninja skills.
Don't we all?
Yeah. So I remember creating some content and some memes that encouraged a homeschool test drive. So where this is not homeschooling. Don't tell people to rush and file their notices of intent, while I want to encourage people to go down that route, I also want them to be cautious and not rush into it. Like if government run school was paused for 2 months or 3 months, it's stopped in the state of North Carolina, by the way. It's a wash for the rest of the year. And I don't know
Same in Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, here too.
Okay. So I think we did that 2 weeks ago. So I lost my train of thought thinking about all the 50 states and what's going on everywhere. But anyway, so just pulling back and slowing down, not rushing out, not being impulsive, which is strange advice coming from me because I am very impulsive. I want immediate results, and you're not really getting that in politics or in school choice realms. In general, it's a long process to affect change. But anyway, so with homeschooling, don't rush into it. Do a test drive, experiment at home. There are books that can guide you. If your child keeps going back to the same book, maybe you can find more that are just like that and see if you can get 2 to 3 hours of a school day, 5 days a week or 4 days a week. You'll find that those days are going to vary. Those hours are going to vary. Some days we are binge learners, so just don't rush into it. Take your time, experiment, figure out what your child likes. And I had a much better tweet about this a month ago when everything first started. But, homeschooling is not sitting on a device 8 hours a day. My child very much misses human interaction after COVID-19. My child, was offended when her friend said, stay 6 feet away, and she was like, are you serious? We see each other all the time, So I do have a social butterfly. I wish it wasn't so sometimes so we could get more schoolwork done. But whatever works for you. So homeschooling doesn't have to look like us moms. Homeschooling can look like a panelist of dads. It doesn't have to be all white ladies either. It can be a variety of colors, any shape, size, color that you can think of. So just don't rush into it. You don't need to file the notice of intent if you know you're just going to go back to school in August or September. Like, there's no point in doing that. You are free to learn all summer, on your own without filing any paperwork and going through any processes, jumping through any hoops, finding your old high school diploma or looking up what your state regulations are, and so on and so forth. So.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such good advice. And don't think that your homeschool has to look like anybody else's. I remember going to visit a family in our neighborhood in Colorado that was homeschooling, and this mom was homeschooling her own kids and one of her nieces, and she had this spreadsheet of every 15 minutes of the day what each child was going to be doing every 15 minutes. And this spreadsheet went from like 6 a.m. to bedtime. And I thought, I couldn't do that for one day. Like, there's no way I could do that. and there's just such a spectrum because families are different, kids are different. And so I think that, the most successful homeschools I've seen are ones that are just kind of shaped to that family. And, maybe just think about, like, what is my ideal home life in a sense? Would I really like a home that's full of music and reading, or what kinds of things do I want to be doing with my children, and just kind of build it around that. Right now, I've talked to family and friends who are just at their wits' ends, and I've talked to some who are just loving life. I think people are in such different places right now. And so I think right now, while things are just crazy, just try to keep the big picture. What is it that we want for our family? Well, we want to be happy. We want our children to be self-sufficient when they grow up, and you'll sort this out. It'll work, but also just start looking at all the options. There are so many out there, and there are so many other people trying to figure this out. And when you talk to each other, you can come up with good solutions together. So I don't know if that's helpful.
No, I think that's great. And I think I was talking to another friend, and we were both saying how a lot of times we don't want to tell other people what our homeschool looks like because we're afraid that theirs is going to be better. That there's judgment even within the homeschool community. But usually once we start talking, and then it's, oh, wow, you're struggling with this too? Yeah, so am I.
Yeah, and then figure it out together.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's kind of power in some of that transparency.
Right.
Yeah, because I know for and as far as kind of my advice for new families, I know when I was starting out, again, I was coming, from a public school background, so I had my whiteboard. I do still have my whiteboard, but I kind of expected everybody, okay, we sit down at this time and we're going to do this lesson and we're going to go, this, and everybody's going to sit here for, 7 hours a day. And it's just, no, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
But again, as far as advice, I would say try to have some type of a schedule. I know my kids, when they get up, they want to know, okay, what are my expectations for the day? But it does not have to be 7 to 8 hours a day. I can usually get through, I would say maybe 3 to 4 hours a day. Typically. And it doesn't have to end on, May 23rd or June 8th or whatever the date is for your school system. You can go longer if your kid needs longer or if they need less time.
Right.
It just really depends on that learner. Because I do in the summertime, we do kind of a modified schedule where we still go to the library. They still have to read. They do some journaling. And things like that. But then, during the regular, school year, quote unquote, and again, that can be whenever. You don't have to follow, August to May or whatever your school district is doing. You do have, some flexibility in that. I don't typically take snow days, but like yesterday we took a Sunday because it was gorgeous outside. So I said,
Why not?
What? Yeah, let's do a Sunday. So we took a little bit of time off yesterday just to go and enjoy, and we were able to get to see some friends. And again, that's a big thing that even for even already homeschooling is they have been isolated because we have our co-op and our other friends and activities and things, and those things have been changed also because of this current situation. So that was really great to be able to get out and
Yeah.
see some friends. So you have that flexibility. So again, don't think that you have to sit there for 7 and 8 hours a day. Like I said, I try to incorporate a lot of, I try to give my kids options. Like I'm not like the scheduling every 15 minutes. I thought I was kind of a hyper schedule. That's like out of my league, every 15 minutes. But I do say, okay, this is what needs to get done today. My daughter, she's 12. So usually I can just say, hey, this is what needs to get done. And she can kind of pick and choose, and she kind of makes her own. She's kind of very self-paced. But my son needs a little more structure. So it's okay right now, you're going to do this, or get this assignment done and then take a break, and then move on. So again, every kid is a little bit different. So some can handle a little bit more freedom, and okay, you can kind of pick and choose when to do different assignments, and then others need a little bit more of the structure. So that, again, that just kind of depends on the child, but having some expectations, and then also with the current situation, giving them some time to talk about how are you feeling, because even I know when all this started, I had some days where I was on the couch, just watching, reading the news and panicking and just absorbing all the changes going on in the world, and the kids need some time to do that as well. How are you feeling? Just having that outlet. So I think it's important, to take some time for that. That's just as important as, getting some of the academics and things done, is just listening, letting them have that voice, and validating their voices is definitely important.
Yeah.
So,
one thing I thought of, there were days, especially with kids in high school, when they just really didn't want to hang out with the family and do schoolwork. And so I would recruit their friends to come help with things. And that worked really well. So for example, we were doing a Shakespeare unit, and getting them to just read it on their own was not working. So I said, why don't you call your friends? We'll just divide up the parts and read it that way. And the friends came over, and it got done. So sometimes if just being with the family is not working, and you could do something like that over FaceTime or Zoom right now. And having, Rebekah, you're talking about having the expectations for the day. I liked to have a checklist. Like, these are the things that have to get done. And then you don't have to come ask me, because I'm probably going to be working with somebody else at that moment. And so, yeah, trying to get them to be self-directed, but they're not all that way. So you're
right.
No, they're not.
You have to make adjustments.
Yeah, I know. We do. Yeah, we do 30 minutes of reading every day, and that's kind of my sort of, okay, I can my relaxation, not really relaxation, but just kind of a break. And my son is now where when he's reading, he wants to talk. Like and it's something so interesting. And so you have to know this. I have to, and it's interesting because it's like these thoughts that are going in his head. He wants to solidify them through words, and he wants to talk about it. And I'm like, like I need some quiet, because I'm more of an introvert. So I kind of need that. I need that occasional break, and just to kind of just quiet my mind. And, so I've had to navigate that of, okay, how much, again, I don't mind, as long as he's talking about what he's reading, that's just how he's processing it. But then I'm like, I need a little bit of quiet time too. So yeah, so it's just, like I said, it just kind of depends on the day, how much, we can have that flexibility, and how much we have to, kind of stay with the structure for the day. But that's a great idea about recruiting the friends. And again, the homeschoolers are not, just isolated off in a castle somewhere that they don't have.
No, and I'd invite their public school friends to come over to do a play.
Yeah,
they like to do it too.
Yeah, I know plays are great because you can make the props, and so you can use the artistic piece and the fluency, and then the literature. Learning the history. So that's a really great kind of integration of different areas coming together.
Another important piece of advice was going back to that tweet I made probably a month ago when COVID happened was we all know these things and we forget to talk about them, but maybe joining up with one of those resource groups where, like, so you might find it in your co-op, Rebekah, but I might have to seek it out. So I pay dues to a group. It costs about $75 a year, and they put on, or they help put on events like Field Day or International Fair. What else? Chivalry Ball. So these things we just lost recently because of COVID-19. And so the homeschool community had to adapt and say, okay, we're going to do the International Fair virtually. Here's my poster board. Here's all about Venezuela. There's nothing here. There's a long line of people. So I was like very frugal in the beginning, and I didn't want to pay dues to anything. It reminds me of the teachers union. I don't want to pay dues because I'm not sure if I'm 100% on board with this. But, in the end, if you can find a group that, for the most part is like you, it will help you get started, help you get off the ground a little bit. Realize that, okay, if their event wasn't just like what you had imagined, you can go create that. So they'll put on like proms, they'll put on sports events, and where your high school graduation is going to be every year, except this year.
Right.
Things like that. So, and then coming together with those parents who are like you and saying, oh, I'm ready to quit. It's nice to know that you don't have to quit. Other people feel the same way that you feel, and you can recuperate, take that 30-minute break, or you could be like the year-round school system where you're working 45 days and then you're taking the 15 days off intentionally. And I think we probably forget to do that, because in my homeschool, I treat every day, it's like every day is a learning day, which is probably too much. And we're not as structured and scheduled. And we can put out the best laid intentions, right? And it's always backfiring, because I just happen to have a student who wants that direction every step of the way. So we may have been in the government-run school a little bit too long, waiting on instructions, waiting on what to do next. Okay, I did my worksheet. Now what do I do? Or I'm going to go do what I want, So we do have to navigate. Going back to what Rebekah said, we're just navigating through real life situations. So if we get off track, you just steer the boat back in the right direction, Right. There is no perfect. It's it's your masterpiece, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go write that poem down.
But I would say that I feel that, and I don't know if it was intentional, but I feel that the systemization of K-12 has kind of hijacked some of that role of and we're the parents, we're the experts on our kids.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not an expert in math or science, but I know my kids.
Right.
And I feel that piece of the parent involvement is critical. And I know when I was doing research for my master's thesis, I was looking at young Latino boys, and I was looking at academic achievement. And the number one factor that made a difference in their achievement was the parent involvement. And this was regardless of the educational background, of the level of education of the parents, or even the income of the parents. It was just that involvement. And that's always stuck with me. And I've even seen studies about homeschool, and I do. We have about 7 minutes or so left. I do want to talk about what are some of the resources and what some of the costs and things involved. But there's a study that was done about homeschoolers and achievement, and it really outlined the fact that the amount of money that you're spending has very little to do with the achievement, and that it really is about the parent involvement. So if you're spending, thousands of dollars, or you're spending, I think the average is like $600 per child per year. I have to double check on that. that most homeschoolers are spending. It's again, it's what you want, but it's that role of the parents, and it's that involvement, and that's the number one thing. And so I really do want parents to know that even if and I struggle sometimes with the geometry and the math. That's really not my thing, and I'll talk about how I mitigate that. But I know my kids, and I really I'm invested in them, and they know that I'm invested in who they are, and who they become, and that it's the who they are that really is the biggest thing for me. So yeah, so parents, you are the expert in your kids, and don't let anybody take that try to take that away from you. And I do feel that sometimes in the public school that we sometimes think that we're the experts, and we kind of discount some of the voices of the parents, and that's something that I think the system really needs to think about and make some changes there. So
Yeah.
so Rachel, so do you have any thoughts on that? And if
just when you homeschool, you learn so much about how your kids learn. Like, I don't think until we started homeschooling, I really understood what kinds of learners my kids were. But once you learn that, you can help them in all kinds of situations. I mean, even when they're in college later on, you can help them tackle their problems because whether this child is like a visual learner or like if they do okay with online. And so it's so valuable to learn that.
Right. And also as parents, we're seeing the long-term perspective, whereas sometimes in public school, again, I know that teachers, really care about their students, keep in touch with their students, but you really only have that child for 9 months,
right?
Whatever it is. And then and then once you're in high school, then it's, you're sometimes having 5 and 6 teachers a day. Whereas again, as the parent, because you have that investment and you're having that long-term perspective, you can, throughout that, that K-12 experience, you can be the one to help mitigate and find, the different strategies for your student and advocate for them. So,
right.
Well, if you would just maybe quickly walk us through a typical homeschool day or a week, because I know our days are different every day. And then if we have time, we'll talk about, the different things that you're doing. Do they have a cost to them? Or I know, Angela, you talked about try to take advantage of some of the free resources that are out there. So if you just want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so my homeschool day looks like me, crazy.
That's okay.
You look great.
That's okay.
Like I said, we have expectations and things like that, but I think we're kind of moving in the direction of unschooling and trying to find what those interests are, and helping those interests flourish. So while my child is probably a high achiever when it comes to civics, because I'm, politically engaged, we might not be doing so well in math, because I know as a mom, I hated math. But I will splurge on, year 4, I will pay the money to put the DVD in the thing and have the math teacher come on and instruct in 7th grade math and 6th grade math. And I will also try different teachers. So I can try one program one year and one another year. I can also do that same exact thing for free if Rachel passed down her Saxon math to me. And that's literally what happened. So when we left in the middle of 3rd grade in February 14th or whatever it was, someone was like, oh, let me give you all this stuff that we didn't complete. And, going back to what Rebekah was saying about incompleted notebooks or workbooks, it's just like, what are people doing if they didn't complete all of their books, So when we started buying our own stuff, whether it was used or half completed, I was just like, we've got to get all this done. But now here in reality and navigating, that's not necessarily how it's got to be. And so I had that child where she was sitting waiting for instruction because she finished the first side of the worksheet, and then she flipped over the worksheet and wrote the entire alphabet, or she wrote all of the times tables. And so doing that busy work and lining up and waiting for others to catch up is part of that government-run school day. Whereas in your homeschool environment, you can streamline that. You can be watching documentaries every night and learning there too, if you have that visual or visual learner. We loved chiseling pieces from an Egypt kit, out of the box. We liked making papyrus, or things like that. So I think I definitely have the hands-on learner in the visual learner, which makes it a little bit trickier for me. So I can't just crack open a book and expect miracles to happen. But if we can figure out ways to navigate, and I think she's oppositional in general. So I think if I brought in you two to do something like American Sign Language instruction, she would absorb that. So it's just working with what we have and trying to figure things out as we go too, and navigating and creating that masterpiece. I'm going to keep going back to that masterpiece thing.
Yeah, I know. I can see the tweets
great.
coming.
All right. Okay, Rachel, if you want to touch on this.
Sure. Yeah. What Angela was saying about kind of like hand-me-down materials, I've really embraced that. We've gotten materials from other people and we've passed them on to other people. And once a year in the springtime here in Lincoln, there's a homeschool exchange. So it's usually at a church and all the homeschoolers can bring the stuff that they're not going to be using the next year. And you can just kind of sort through and take what you want and leave what you want. That's really helpful. I found thrift stores to be excellent for finding great books and textbooks, especially in university towns. There are a lot of textbooks that end up in the thrift stores. We love Khan Academy for math.
Yes.
And now they've expanded. They have all kinds of things. I mean, they have like AP art history now and lots of things like that. We've also paid for a few things here and there that we didn't feel like we could do. So for example, one of our kids wanted to learn Korean. I don't know anything about Korean. And so we found an online class through a university where she would get to FaceTime a TA, and she ended up getting, that was an accredited program. So she got some credit that would show up on a transcript, which that's kind of a whole different topic, but
we can do a whole episode.
It would be, it'd be interesting to talk about that and how you get homeschoolers ready for applying for college and stuff. But there's also a co-op here. It's called the Lancaster Learning Link, and they have classes on Mondays, and you pay, I'm thinking, it's been a couple of years since I did it, but I think it's about $250 a class a year. And so they have class with the teacher on Monday and then no class the rest of the week. So Mondays is like when they go and they see everybody and they get their assignments and talk about their assignments. And so we've done that too. And some of those teachers are fantastic. So it's kind of a nice way to fill a gap if you feel uncomfortable or there's something you can't do. Like we did a biology lab there because I didn't want to find a fetal pig to dissect at my house, right? So somebody else could take care of figuring that out. So you might be surprised if you just look around your community to find out the resources. And homeschoolers tend to be frugal because we're paying these expensive property taxes anyway. And so we're trying to figure out how to enrich our kids' educational experiences. And so there's a lot of give and take and a lot of sharing and lots of great resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do a whole another talk about just co-ops and, the different resources that are out there. I know we go to the library. Our libraries are very homeschool friendly. They have programs just for homeschoolers. And we have some co-ops that we pay for. I love the science because they do the labs. And like you said, I don't want to have to deal with all that.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Yeah, a lot of blood and guts. And I know for me, I also do some bartering because I was a Spanish teacher. And it's funny because neither one of my kids want to learn Spanish. So
of course.
I have one doing French and sign language. And then my son has done a little bit with German, just online. But we'll see where he goes with that. So I tutor Spanish. And then I have another mom who tutors my kids in math.
Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah, so we kind of have the bartering. So if you have, something that you do feel comfortable teaching, there's always that option, that bartering option.
Yeah, we did some of that too, because I've taught dance. So I would teach dance and then get piano lessons for free.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, that's
That
great.
is nice.
Yeah, so that's helpful. But yeah, so just so many resources and things out there. But any closing thoughts that either of you want to kind of add here? I know we're going a little bit over the hour, but yeah, well, I know there's just tons of topics and other, we'll have to schedule some other times to dig into some of the other topics.
I would just say, just trust your instincts as a parent. Like, if you feel that something is not right, that you should probably follow that and make the necessary changes until it feels comfortable and right. Like, I really think as parents, we're kind of given those instincts because we're the ones who love and care about these children more than anybody else. And so, so just follow that and be patient with yourself and your children. And it does take time to figure these things out, and you have to be flexible because what you figure out with one child may not work with another, or may not work year to year.
Right.
So maybe don't go into it thinking, all right, I'm going to do the well-trained mind exactly as it lays out. We have used that and love it, but maybe it's not going to work forever, and that's okay if you have to make adjustments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would so I think you just said take your time, right, Rachel? That's a great piece of advice. Not rushing, and trusting your instincts. That is a good one. I'll say that again. I think you just said that, but there's like a plethora of options. So people need to be mindful of that and not get overwhelmed by that. I know that is something that personally overwhelms me when I have too many options, kind of like, I've been watching Monk episodes lately. You don't know him. He's OCD and has lots of phobias. And if you give him too many choices, he keeps choosing. He's like, let me try this chair. Let me try that chair. So if you know you're going to take that plunge, that's fine. But maybe don't look at all the options when it comes to curriculum. Find learners that maybe are like your child and then try to mirror that. So if you've got that neighboring family in your community and you know your kids are going to mesh well, you didn't necessarily have to dig into a certain subject because maybe you could pair up on that. And, relying on your neighbors and the homeschool community is very helpful. So I didn't feel comfortable being a homeschooler until I had that network. And I didn't realize that, like working my way up to it, I was just like, okay, a year into it, my neighbor was calling me a settler, like the insurance commercial where we're all sharing one lollipop over the fireplace. So the mythology is really out there going strong. I forget, someone else had an idea, a preconceived notion of what homeschoolers were too. And so did I, and so did Rebekah. Rachel probably did too.
Of course.
But just remember, it's your masterpiece, okay? It's your canvas. So I'm going to milk the masterpiece thing. Let me get out my paintbrush.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, Rachel and Angela, for your time and being here, for your transparency. I really, like I said, I want to set up more of these talks to just get information out for families and just help them navigate this time, but also, be thinking about the future. And this may change a lot of people's minds about their kids and the direction they want to take with their education. So
yeah. People shouldn't believe all the negative stuff either. Ignore, what's her face, Elizabeth Bartholet.
We could do a whole talk about, just the Harvard article.
Yeah, we're all not home abusing our children. We are loving our children.
Wow.
Consider the motivations of the speakers, right?
Yeah. And then with that article, even in academia, she wasn't following even a lot of the standards that even academians would follow in her study and her claims. So anyway, we could do a whole talk about just that article. So
yeah, well, thanks, Rebekah.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you so much. And I hope more homeschoolers reach out to you and give you more content, and folks shouldn't be afraid, right? Give an hour of your time. Share your message.
All right. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.